As do you both. All right. Okay. Good Friday morning. If it's Friday morning and if it's 9 a.m., that means it's time for another Backyard Naturalist, the series that connects us with our yards, our houses, our pantries, our urban green spaces, the skies above, the dirt below, the weather, you name it. My name is Tim, and this week I am the host for a Halloween edition of the Urban Ecology Center's Backyard Naturalist. I also invite you to go back in the archives to previous Halloween episodes. We had pumpkins in As Gourd as It Gets. We had worms. We had bats, I think. And today we are talking about a fascinating plant that goes way against the typical MO of most plants. It looked at other plants and kind of like put a thumb in their nose and said, I'm just going to be like, not like you. This is a Halloween episode, not only because of the name Witchhazel, but because this is a plant that is just starting to bloom right about now. This is the early blooming is happening right now with these flowers in very late fall as it's getting cold. So sit back. Maybe you have a nice warm pumpkin or apple spice beverage from the comfort of your home or your desk or other viewing location, and we will listen to stories told by an amazing plant in episode 8 of season 5 of Backyard Naturalist, Halloween 3, season of the Witch Hazel. And if you're into Halloween movies, Halloween 3 was just really strange. It was a strange deviation from the Halloween storyline, much like the Witch Hazel is a strange deviation from most plants. A huge thank you to all of you sharing this time with me this morning. I appreciate you. I'm glad you're here. I'm honored and humbled to embark on this journey of learning with you. And an additional shout out to all of the subscribers that help us keep this series going. If you enjoy these get-togethers, I encourage you to look into the benefits of being a subscriber, which to me, the best benefit is that there's no hassle of registration. It happens automatically. As a subscriber, there is nothing you need to do other than open your email each Friday morning with the link mailed to you. And we will be celebrating your subscribership with a party next month at a local best kept secret of a green space, the Blue Heron Wildlife Sanctuary up near Saukville. So you should have received information if you are a subscriber, and if you haven't, let us know ASAP. There's still time to join on this experience by purchasing an annual or seasonal subscription. And tomorrow afternoon, we are super excited to bring back Dr. Bill Keene, another local best kept secret of a geologist who is just an absolute joy to learn from. He's so knowledgeable and passionate about rocks and sand and glaciers. He's going to lead us on a short journey through space and time at Doctor's Park, looking at these same subjects, the sand, the rocks, the glaciers. So if you haven't had the pleasure of taking a walk with Bill, or if you have, you will not want to miss this tour through Doctor's Park. You can register on the Urban Ecology Center's website. And again, these monthly trips are open to anyone but free to subscribers. And I understand that not everyone can or wishes to have a subscription. And we're still glad you're here to enjoy this learning journey with us. I am also excited to let you know about another appreciation event. If you are a volunteer at the Urban Ecology Center, you are invited to join us for the annual Volunteer Appreciation Party on Sunday, November 5th at 10 a.m. at Riverside Park. There will be live music and a chance to hang out with some fantastic people. And best of all, there will be brunch. And again, just a quick tour through the upcoming eco-travel trips. We're heading down to Southern California in late fall, early March for a tour hosted by Amanda, showing us her stomping grounds, her growing up stomping grounds. This is out of order. And we're also heading back to the Galapagos, but that was Doctor's Park, which is going to be a really fun hike tomorrow. And then we're heading to the Galapagos again in April for a magical trip. And then we're heading to Costa Rica next August for an accessible, wheelchair accessible trip that I'm really excited about. Quick venture to the world of space exploration. There isn't a whole lot going on right now. Actually, there is a lot going on, but there's no like recent developments. There's a lot going on with bringing humans back to the moon and Mars in particular. There's just this huge amount of effort in getting to the moon and Mars. There's the space races are well back up. There is an interesting project about to launch. So there's a private company out of Houston called Intuitive Machines that's going to launch its IM-1 mission, which could be a major player in transporting payloads to the moon to support all of these other missions. There's the missions themselves, and then there's a lot of support going on behind the scenes. This will be if it all goes well, it'll be the second spacecraft to land on the south pole of the moon. It's going to use a SpaceX rocket to boost its Nova-C spacecraft. And this will actually, even with all of this activity, this is going to be the first American spacecraft to land on the moon since 1972. And again, it's going to be like a precursor to a major support system for NASA and others. NASA has hired this particular company to fly up to 5 payloads to this spot. They've hired other companies to fly payloads to other spots. They just have to get a bunch of stuff to the moon first, so that when the astronauts arrive, they have all that stuff for their extended stays. So this is going to likely have instruments that'll measure radiation, magnetic field, surface composition. It's going to have advanced solar arrays and a navigation beacon. And yeah, a lot of stuff going on right now. But we are primarily here to come back to our planet to talk about this plant, the witch hazel. And yeah, the witch hazel is just kind of a rebel in the plant world. It's blazing its own trail, kind of fighting against the stereotypes of what a plant is supposed to do. So if we again take a step back in the plant family, just your quick tree plant systematics, witch hazel is a dicot, because upon germination, there are 2 seed leaves that emerge. And this is a clade that includes many familiar plants, from sunflowers to maple trees to dandelions. And then we move to the order Saxifragilisticexpialidocious, which is an extremely diverse group of plants. It's got 15 families, 100 genera, 2,500 species. The largest family is the stone crops, which is a group of succulents that's often used as garden plants, like the jade tree or sedum. This group also contains some yummy plants, the black currants, the gooseberries. If you have peonies in your garden, that's another plant in this order. Things like water milfoil, sweet gum trees are some of the examples that are in this particular order. And then we move to the family with the coolest name, the Shamalama Hamamelidaceae, or if you just prefer, it's the witch hazel family. The flowers in this family share characteristics that kind of have the like Medusa hair looking flowers, the narrow tubes. And the greatest diversity of this family is in the eastern part of North America. So more species of witch hazel in eastern North America than any other part of the world. And so this is where you kind of feel like this is a flower that or a shrub. It's actually a shrub that was, I don't know, going through an identity crisis or just tired of being like all the other plants. So, they held a convention, looked through the plant manual, like what it means to be a plant, what you're supposed to do as a plant, and like, let's be different. Let's shake things up a bit. So they're going through the catalog, starting with the chapter on flower bloom time, and say, okay, we have flowers that bloom in the spring. You have your cherry trees, the cherry blossoms. You have plants that bloom in the flower, your pagoda dogwoods. I have a lovely pagoda dogwood in my front yard. There's plants that bloom in the fall, those gaudy sunflowers. And they said, okay, we're gonna do it. We're gonna go rogue, and we're gonna open up our flowers in the wintertime. And the other plants were like, what? It's crazy, especially in Wisconsin. So they did it. The flowers in this family took a niche in this northern deciduous, seasonally very cold community that just seems kind of bonkers. But the flowering time for this group of plants ranges from very late fall, starting right about now. This is the earliest witch hazels are blooming right now, and it goes through late February into March. that's when you can find this tree in bloom. It's a winter flowering tree. And we're mostly going to focus on the most common native witch hazel, and that is in the genus Hamamelis. There are 5 extant species in this genus, 3 in North America, 1 in Japan, and 1 in China. And so the North American species include the big leaf witch hazel, which is in the southeastern United States. And this plant wasn't discovered, I should say discovered. It wasn't named by Western scientists until 2004, so less than 20 years ago. And this flower blooms from December to February. Then you have the Ozark witch hazel found in the Ozark Plateau, so that's primarily Missouri, Oklahoma, and Arkansas. And these flowers appear in the middle of winter, continue until early spring, so like December to March. So I don't know if you'd count them as like either really late or really early. And then the common witch hazel, which is the one we have here in Wisconsin. These 3 species collectively around here are known as winter blooms for the obvious reason. And then rounding out this small but mighty genus, as I mentioned, there's a species native to Japan with the very creative name of the Japanese witch hazel, and one native to China with the name of Chinese witch hazel. So to give credit to the originality of the folks that named these. Even though only 3 of these are native to these parts, you can find all 5 here because they're really popular as cultivated flower or trees in gardens. Because, you know, if you want to get color in your garden in the wintertime, you can plant these. And it makes sense when you think of a lot of the trees that are cultivars here or invasive here. They're usually from, you know, that part of the Asian continent, northern European continent, where the climate is very similar to here. So these other witch hazels do well in North America as well. And so you can find them all here in our temperate climate. This genus Hamamelis means together with fruit. It actually means like together with melon. And one of the many unique characteristics of the witch hazel that might be a result of its winter flowering time, depending on the time of year, you can find mature fruits, seed capsules, flowers, buds, and leaves on the same plant at the same time, which is extremely rare in the plant world. You know, you can often see leaves and flowers at the same times, or even like leaves and buds and seed capsules at the same time, but to have all of these stages of development on the same tree at the same time is extremely rare. So try to do it. You know, there's a lot of bucket list items you can do with witch hazel. Try to see if you can find a witch hazel and see if you can get all 5 of these things at the same time. So then at this point, the witch hazels went back to the manual and they were like, okay, we've got one of these things figured out. And now they're in the chapter that's marked seed dispersal. And they're like, okay, well, there's already a lot of plants that disperse their seed by wind. Seems kind of boring. There's a lot of other plants that disperse their seeds by water. That's maybe a little cooler. You get to hang out in the tropics. And still too common, they're saying. So then other plants disperse seeds by putting them in these yummy fruits to be carried away by mammals or birds. Probably thought that seems like a lot of work. And then they're like, oh, here's a cool one. Some plants make seeds that are really heavy so that when they fall, gravity causes the seeds to stop, drop, and roll, like this Ohio Buckeye. And they're like, okay, maybe that's kind of cool. But then they're like, wait a second, you can have explosions to be your seed dispersal mechanisms. Like, yeah, heck yeah, that's what we're gonna do. So the witch hazel method of seed dispersal is through explosions. So just like the touch-me-nots that are so much fun to pop, the witch hazel seed capsules build up a pressure, and then they have this weaker fault line that eventually splits open, and the seeds are forcefully ejected away from the plant. They can travel, I think, 20 miles an hour, 30 feet away. So there's some major power behind that seed ejection. At the end of this, we'll take a look at a video that some scientists have done of the slow motion. They have to slow it down to see these seed capsules, and they're spinning just like bullets out of a gun. So major power behind the seed ejection. Sometimes people say, I've never heard this. People say you can hear when they explode their seeds, and so it also has a colloquial name of the snapping hazelnut. It's another bucket item list. Like, I'd love to be able to go out and hear the snapping hazelnut, to hear this explosion. But I guess you'd have to be ready to duck, because it's a major power behind that seed coming out. And then to kind of round things out, now this upstart plant needed a name, and we decided on witch hazel, which is why we're featuring this plant at Halloween, because it's fun, fun to focus on the name witch. It also blooms around Halloween. If you're part of my generation, you probably grew up watching Looney Tunes on TV. My kids, not so much. And Witch Hazel was a cackling character on the Looney Tunes cartoons, which really don't hold up well. But she was always trying to outsmart bugs, put him in one of her potions. So some associate this plant with witches because of its name, and maybe because it does the impossible. How could a plant possibly bloom in the winter without the help of some sort of magic spell? And then one podcast I listened to likened the galls on the leaves of witch hazel to the familiar pointy witches' hats. And in each of these galls, there's some aphids that are kind of sucking on the tree sap in the protection of their galls. So these are the kind of the fun explanations of why it's called witch hazel, and you're welcome to stay here. But if you kind of want to follow the sciencey wet blanket explanation for why witch hazel, the Old English word for this plant is, I don't know how you pronounce it, but you can see how it's spelled. And that word means bendable or pliable, which is one of the characteristics of this plant. It's very bendy. So this is a witch elm from Sweden. We just haven't heard about it as much, but it's also named for its very bendy properties. So it's a witch elm and a witch hazel. So really just the name means it's a hazel that's very bendy, even though it's really not a hazel. And because it's so bendy, witch hazel was used by the early European colonists as a divining rod, also known as a dowsing rod. And this came from a belief that likely started in Germany in the 1500s, that the branches of some plants, and particularly in Germany, a plant called the hazel, could lead you to water. So the divining rod, the dowsing rod, when they arrived here, they also found a very bendy tree that they called the witch hazel, or the bendy hazel, and then that was used as a replacement for the old school hazels as a divining rod. So even though it's not a hazel or related to hazelnut, it's named for the European version, and the witch comes from it. So some debunk this method as, witchcrafty. Others believe it works maybe through the magic of like electrostatic properties. Many materials have been used as divining rods. A good friend of mine, some of you on this call know who this is, and this isn't him. This is a picture of somebody that doesn't look like him off the internet, but one of our local birders swore that if you took two straightened metal coat hangers you could use it to find water. And he told me that these divining rods led him to a place on the Olmsted Circle, and sure enough, that is a place where there is an underwater spring. So if it gets really wet, sometimes you'll see a trickle of water coming out from the circle down into the ravine valley along that path. So either he already knew about it, or he got lucky, or it really worked, that those divining rods led him to water. But witch hazels, with their forked branches and their pliable properties, are a popular source for divining rods or dowsing rods. And then, of course, you had humans living here way before then. And they also used witch hazel to find water, but they used a much more straightforward and common sense, less witchcrafty method. They just knew that witch hazels tended to grow by streams. So either permanent streams or ephemeral streams or underground streams. if you could find witch hazels, there was likely water nearby. And so it is a good way to find water in that respect, regardless of how you feel about the other method. So yeah, this is a characteristic of witch hazels. They like to grow by water. They grow in colonies, which probably makes sense given their explosive method of seed dispersal. It's not going to get too far. And so you have these colonies of witch hazels. And they also have, you'll notice, a lot of shoots arising from the same plant. And then this leads us to another important question. So if this plant is blooming in the winter and it's not using witchcraft, and it's an angiosperm or a flowering plant that needs a pollinator, who the heck is going to be around during the wintertime for pollination? And most sensible pollinators are either dead or in bed at this time and wouldn't dare venture out to Wisconsin winters. But it turns out there are a couple of likely major players in the winter pollination game. I didn't get a picture of them, but one is called the winter moth. So there's a moth in the winter. And that is the likely suspect to pollinate a winter blooming plant. But then how the heck can this moth be out in the winter when most self-respecting bugs are holed up and protected? It turns out that the group is also called the nocturnal shivering moths. So the moths shiver, and just like us, why do we shiver? We shiver when we're cold. And the point of shivering is to increase muscle activity, to increase metabolism, so that your body warms up. So you kind of think of shivering as a reaction to the cold, but it's really a mechanism to help warm your body up. And then you're in trouble medically if you stop shivering, actually. So if you don't get up and do some jumping jacks or move around and warm your body when it's cold, your body's going to do it for you. Involuntarily warm you up by shivering. So these moths are able to shiver for the same reason, and these are cold-blooded or endothermic animals and ectothermic animals. And amazingly, they are able to, by shivering, increase their body temperature by 50 degrees. In order to fly, the moths need to be at 86 degrees. So then if you do the math, if this is a moth that can increase its internal temperature by 50 degrees to get to 86 degrees, it only needs temperatures to be at about 35 or 36 degrees, just above freezing. It can't do it for very long, but if you have any time in the winter time when you just get in the mid to upper 30s, these moths can come out and take advantage of an area that no other insect is going to be around in. And it's not just the moths. There are some other insects that can do this, but these moths are specialists at it. So when you go for a walk in the wintertime, very unlikely that you'll see insects, but there are a few ones that can join you, including springtails and some other things. So when they're out there looking for food, they come across a witch hazel that's in bloom. The witch hazel has very sweet nectar, chemically, and it also has a very sticky pollen. So it doesn't take much to start pollinating these witch hazels very effectively. So it's a really, really good example of symbiosis through coevolution. You have a few upstarts in each group that are like, I'm gonna, the winter time is tough, but I think I can do this. When most other animals and plants are dormant. And there are a few other food sources. I did find a picture of another pollinator, the winter ants. And I will neither confirm nor deny that there may have been some photoshopping done, but I just found it on the internet. There is really a group of ants called winter ants that, like the winter moths, have been able to adapt to surviving cold winter temperatures, and they've also been observed sipping that really sweet nectar from witch hazel plants. Ants are a pollinator that we tend to think less of as pollinators. We usually think of bees and butterflies, but ants do a really good job of pollinating as well. And there's a horticulturist, Greg Torres of Northside Green Space, that has documented ants coming out and sipping the flowers of witch hazel are very shallow, but again with very sweet nectar. And he's observed ants, 4 or 5 ants sitting around the flower sipping nectar, like a little buffet bar or something like that. So you do have, even though it's flowering in the wintertime, it doesn't make much sense. There are a lot of animals, relatively speaking, enough animals to make that strategy work. Another interesting adaptation is that particularly when it's very cold, often at night, the witch hazel flowers will kind of roll up and then protect some of the more delicate exposed areas, that particularly the pollen, the nectar. And so it kind of nestles up tight at night, and then if the sun comes out, it hits it, it warms up, the flower petals will unfold again to expose the reproductive parts again, assuming that some nighttime insects will come out and do their part. And then finally, if you weren't aware, oh, sorry, there's also, if you, Doug Tallamy, if you haven't read his stuff or heard his work, he's just done some amazing works about the role of pollinators in native plants. And he found that 62 species of Lepidoptera rely on the witch hazel. So when you think of the part of its community besides the pollination, there are a lot of plants, or a lot of insects, a lot of caterpillars that will either feed on or use the witch hazel for shelter. That's, of course, the basis for the birds and the mammals and the other things. And so 62 species of Lepidoptera rely on witch hazel. There are even a couple of caterpillars that are named. There's the witch hazel folder and the witch hazel roller. This is a case where it's kind of rolling up the leaf of the plant, and then using its web to kind of keep it rolled up for shelter, and then it can eat from a very safe place. And yeah, so it's a really important role. It also is important for some birds because it's a lower shrub on the kind of an understory shrub. There are a lot of birds that like the way that particularly for cup nests. So wood thrushes and some flycatchers in particular will favor witch hazel as a nesting site. And so yeah, it's got a really important role year round as part of a plant community. And then I think there's the other part of the witch hazel that maybe you're not as familiar with some of these other natural history stories, but there's you likely heard of witch hazel in either a medicinal or a cosmetic context. So humans early on found out that if you boil a lot of parts of the plant and create an extract, there are a lot of it's used as for a lot of remedies, or as a remedy for a lot of ailments. So it's full of tannins. It's got astringent properties. It's used as a topical anesthetic. It's used cosmetically to help with like blemishes and sores. And it's an extract that is approved by the FDA for these medicinal properties. And so, one of the more popular forms are the Pond's extract, but also Dickinson's witch hazel, which you can find. There's a lot. It's still very popular, and has been, for thousands of years, from the earliest humans that were here till today. And that is witch hazel. And so when you think about hiking in the winter, and you think that, well, I'm going to go out in the winter, maybe I'll see some cool snow, but I'm probably not going to see the things I'm looking forward to seeing in the spring. If you find some witch hazel trees, you can still see the signs of life through the dark days of winter. And it's not just the witch hazel, there's the invertebrate community that's relying on there. So you can go on a hike in the middle of December, in the middle of January, still to look for both insects and flowers. It's not super common as a shrub, so you might have to do some exploring or asking around to where you can find it. Again, looking for bottomlands, although sometimes you can find them up on ridges as well. And but try to that it gives you a lot of things to observe as a naturalist. No matter what time of year, you can just start thinking through, okay, these are the buds for next year. These are the seed pods, the capsules that at some point are going to explode. These are the already exploded capsules. There's the flowers, the leaves. It's really a great lesson in plant development, and just not your common development. Try to see a pollinator in the middle of winter. Try to listen for the crack of the exploding seed capsules. Just it turns it into a really fascinating plant to observe and to look for. And maybe the best chance you have for any of this is just to be outside more. So being outside more, and being outside at all times of year, and being outside when others don't want to be outside. And try to witness some of these events that occur when some of us like to be a little more comfortable. So that's Witchhazel, and I'm going to share some videos with the folks that are here. One video in particular looks for some at the exploding seed pods, and I will also share that link to that on the email next week. Thank you for joining us. I will stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to get to